our session. So I'm joined here by State Senator Adam Hollier of Senate District 2. And so I'm just going to tell everybody here a little bit about our state senator here for Harper Woods, Hamtramck, Highland Park, parts of Detroit, and the Grosse Pointes community. So all 5 points. And did I say Highland Park and Hamtramck? Yes, I got all the H's. Okay, so so Senator Hollier was born and raised in North End of Detroit and a graduate of Detroit Public Schools. He earned a bachelor's in industrial and labor relations from Cornell University. Oh, and he has a master's in urban planning from the University of Michigan. And then you've also been the director of government affairs for the Michigan Fitness Foundation. That explains a lot. And also he has been instrumental on a lot of developing policies to help Detroiters get new lights and make neighborhoods safe. And in addition to being a former volunteer firefighter, he is also an Army reservist. So you also serve in, so thank you for your service. And anything else I missed? Anything else you want to let folks know? Tell us about yourself, sir.
I mean, what do you want to know? I mean, I'm married. My wife and I will celebrate our 10-year wedding anniversary in October 1st.
Nice.
Got 2 little kids.
Beautiful, and the lovely new babies.
Yeah, and so I've got a 3-year-old girl, Lillian, and a 5-month-old boy. We call him AJ. He's a junior. So yeah.
All right.
Easy breezy.
Yeah. Okay. So all right. And I just kind of wanted to, invite you on the show because I think that people know you pretty well out there in the community. You do a really great job of, just kind of, representing where you serve. You're very visible. We've seen you on Let It Rip. We've seen you, just out in the communities and, just really doing a great job of just fighting for the policies that we believe in over here on the East Side. And so my first question is really around, just making sure that people understand the role of their local electeds. So when it comes to, just the roles and the functions of, legislation at the state level. So explain to us a little bit about what's the difference between a state senator versus a congressperson versus your state rep, your actual senator for going to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, so I think, when we're all kids or kids of a certain age, you remember kind of Schoolhouse Rock, how a bill becomes a law and talking about government. So there is a legislature at just about every level of government. So at the federal level, you think about Congress. And so there are 2 U.S. senators, and right now we have 14 members of Congress. And then at the state level, there are 38 state senators, and there are 110 members of the Michigan House of Representatives. And then as you go into your local community, you have a mayor, and let's take Harper Woods. There's a mayor, and then there's city council people like yourself, and you also have a city manager. And so that's kind of that local structure. And so when we think about what do you do as a legislator in general, the people always think about legislating, right? Like writing laws or passing those kind of things. But even more than that, one of the big pieces that legislators deal with is the purse, as they would say. So, appropriating dollars and doing budgeting, things like that. And so I sit on the Appropriations Committee in the Michigan Senate, and it's been a really interesting opportunity to see and to influence where dollars go. And so it's been a big priority and a big part of what I've done since I've joined the legislature is making sure that I'm bringing money home back to the district, because that's really what it's all about. It's making sure that your tax dollars come back to you in a way that's meaningful and responsive. So we do those kind of things at the state level. We pass bills. And so I've gotten a couple of those signed into law and doing those kind of things. And so kind of fun facts about me. I had Public Act 1 from this year. So the first law that Governor Whitmer signed this year was one of mine. It was a Memorial Highway resolution for Representative Joe Tate's father, who died in the line of duty as a firefighter. And it happened because it was the first bill because of some kind of crazy, archaic technical rules that kind of kept it from getting to the governor for signature last term. And so we had to bring it back. And 2 years ago, I also had the very fun and unique honor of having a bill passed with the least number of days. And so that allowed folks who were on military orders and military duty to vote remotely while serving on local boards and commissions. And so as you've seen over the last year, it's been a real coming to grips with folks about the ability to use technology to vote remotely and do some of those kind of things. And so I think as a legislature, we really had to reconcile balancing technology and understanding what that looks like.
True. And that's, as you talked about, like, bringing money back into the district, and then also, kind of making sure that, folks, we've had a lot of deployments of, folks who serve, and reservists. So do you think that COVID, presented some of those challenges that kind of, made us have to refocus and reprioritize? What was it like, because you never stopped having to go into work just because of COVID. What was that like, one? And then two, how did COVID change who is going to be on board with what thing? You mentioned, helping veterans be able to vote. That was something that everybody, Republicans, Democrats, everybody, it was in and out, record time. So how has COVID kind of posed these kind of challenges? And I was kind of reminded of, you coming last year onto a, virtual thing I had to talk about some of the unknowns. Now that we know, like, what was life like, and how can we kind of maybe anticipate what's next for
I think
here?
the first piece is, as you talk about what it was like going into work, it was crazy, right? So for a long time, I was I was one of a small number of people who were going into work, and I was driving an hour and a half every day to do that. And I was sitting in a room with a bunch of people, and and that's that was a very different experience than what most people who were doing. And for the most part, the Senate did not make what I would consider reasonable accommodations or changes to our regular business, except having a few less people on the Senate floor. And that's compared to a number of other states that did very different things. So I have a friend who is a legislator in Minneapolis. They did remote voting, and they got technology so they could do, like, I don't know, fingerprint scanning or some type of biometrics, so that it was clear that it was them pushing the button. But people made those kind of things. We made those kind of accommodations for local governments, right? So that city council members and county commissioners, and so that they can meet remotely. But the legislature never made those kind of accommodations for ourselves. And you saw kind of very real issues. So my state rep, Isaac Robinson, was one of the first few casualties of COVID-19. And, there were any number of outbreaks. So I think when I look at those numbers, about a quarter of the people I serve with in the legislature contracted COVID-19. And many of them, we expect, got it from passing it between each other, because we were congregating in a workplace and doing those kind of things. So it was certainly a very tense space. And you also look at, last year we had very vocal and chaotic protests where people came armed into the Capitol, stood above us in the gallery, where a number of the folks who were at the Capitol riot and insurrection in DC saw similar types of things that just didn't quite get as far here in Michigan. And you saw, the plot to capture and kill the governor. They also were planning to take the state capitol by force and potentially kill members of the legislature. So, it was a year of really tense moments at first, and those kind of things. And I don't think they were well suited in the way that Republicans and folks looked at the legislature. And so there was this idea that Democrats wanted to shut the state down. It's like, no, we just want people to stop dying from COVID. We want the spread to stop. And if people have been responsible and made the moves necessary early, we would have been able to do that, but people have been unwilling to do so. And similarly, as we talk about getting vaccinated right now, people are like, hey, well, the governor should be doing more things. Well, 4 weeks ago, people were like, oh, the governor needs to open up the whole state. And, whatever. And, now you also have just as many people who are saying, well, the governor needs to shut everything down. So, well, there's only so much people are willing to take. And Republicans who control the Senate and the House are unwilling to accept any level of additional stuff and have been fighting even the current levels, even with all of the issues that we're having with spread, with positivity, with all that kind of stuff. So the governor's in an incredibly difficult situation, as she looks at and how she plans to make it safe. I think it's really incumbent upon all of us to get vaccinated. I know I've gotten my 2 shots. I know you've done the same. And it's really important that as Black people, we continue to remind folks that Black people are not vaccine hesitant, right? So when we look at other vaccines, Black people get them in as high or higher than the general population, because Black people understand that COVID kills us. It kills us in higher numbers. And over the last year, we saw that. I mean, when you talk about what was it like? Well, at the beginning of the pandemic, people were like, well, it doesn't, it's not going to affect Black people. Oh, well, or it's not going, it's not going to see color. But we saw that it did. And I think that's really laid bare the racial inequities and issues. You saw racism declare a public health emergency. And coincidentally, the chief public health officer for the state is a Black woman. And so, it shows how important representation is, and all these things mattering. And so when I look out and say, how different is my year 2021, or how different was 2020 than 2019? Fundamentally different, right? I mean, we wear a mask everywhere we go. We don't see folks, it's staying at home. I mean, heck, I even had to get one of these ring lights because I was told by too many people that my lighting was trash. And so last year people were like, I saw one Zoom. I was on like 2 Zooms before that ever. And now everyone, it's like Zoom all the time, all day, every day. Like, our lives are fundamentally changed and will be so forever. And the only way we're going to get back to any sense of normalcy is getting shots in arms.
Right. And so, I think your hesitancy with the ring light was probably because, like, oh, we may get back to normal, but then the reality sunk in where it's just like, this might be our new normal. But I feel like you kind of touched on something with, the discussion of, like, storming our state capitol and then the national capitol, with folks with guns armed to the teeth, and, just kind of, all of these threats that were credible, that we knew people were going to kidnap elected officials or kill them. And, people came to the Capitol in Washington, D.C. with a noose for Mike Pence. And, so there's been a discussion, a parallel, considering that we've just had, another death of an unarmed Black man at the hands of police, in America. And so, how can we push for more changes in, not only policing, like, can we have more community policing? We saw that this woman wasn't even, a part of the community where, this man was arrested. And, how can we use maybe more de-escalation tactics? And, how can we really fight this with policy as we see more of this rise?
So much of this is, I'm supposed to describe this. Last year was not the first time a Black man was killed unarmed by a police officer. Last year was not the first time a Black man was killed unarmed by a police officer saying he couldn't breathe. Last year was not the first time that they caught it on camera, right? It wasn't new. What changed is that white people said, oh, that is abhorrent. White people saw those kinds of things. So Black people have been pissed about it forever, been talking about it forever, been complaining about it forever. And so what changed is white people changed. And that is what's really important. And as we talk about these kind of things, that's the only way we're going to see any kind of changes, right? So just down the road from you in Grosse Pointes Park, you saw a Confederate, or not a Confederate flag, a KKK flag hung in a window across the, at their Black neighbor after, seeing a full gas can in someone's recycling bin, right? Like, as we talk about these things, what was not new or interesting was that Black people were outraged. It was that white Grosse Pointers were outraged, and that they said that that was unacceptable. They said that that was not tolerated or would not be tolerated in their neighborhood. So when we talk about what reforms are necessary, it's for white people to say, hey, this is unacceptable. It is not acceptable to feel, one, as threatened as white people can be when they talk about and see and interact with Black people. But even more than that, that we address kind of the whole gamut of systemic issues that cause these things to happen, right? So is a Black man more likely to get pulled over? Yes. Is a Black man more likely to be afraid that something bad is going to happen? Yes. So are you in more tense? Are we all a little bit more tense? Yes. So it's all of these things saying, hey, you know what we have to do is we have to go and say, wherever you fit in that role, you need to play a part, right? So as a city councilwoman, you need to be talking about, well, how do we better train our police officers? How do we better recruit police officers? How do we better punish police officers? How do we better train our community members? How do we better talk about and message what we think is acceptable or unacceptable? How do we as a policymaker say what are acceptable reasons to be pulled over or not pulled over? What are primary offenses? What are not? Should they chase someone? When can you use force? When can you not use force? Why are you using force, right? So you look at this most recent, situation, and when, they say, well, they pulled him over because his tag were expired and he had a warrant and, he ran. Well, okay, he ran. That does not mean you need to shoot him, right? You don't need to fire a taser at him because he ran. What harm is he doing?
Guilt does not mean somebody deserves to die. And it's that dehumanizing that happens.
And it's not just guilt. A court determines guilt, right? So we're talking about apprehension. And so at what level is it acceptable to use force to apprehend someone? So George Floyd, for example, was killed over a fake 20. Now, people love to say, well, crime is a crime. Well, I don't know if he even meant to pass a fake 20. He could have got a 20 from someone else and it was a fake 20. So the police officer can't say what did or did not happen, just what those facts were. And I don't mean to litigate the minutia of those things, but as we talk about policy, it's addressing every single level of opportunities for those to happen. Right. So should that be something that you call the police about? Is that somebody you talk to your bank about? What level of engagement are these things necessary and engaged in? Because the discussions of police reform doesn't work don't make sense, right? The city of Detroit has done a lot since the 70s and the 60s when Coleman Young got elected in moving the police. But the Detroit riots, that piece, that rebellion, was because there was this thing called the Big Five, where Detroit cops used to ride around and just beat up Black folks. And that was almost 60 years ago. And they were like, that was the reason and the impetus. And so we're still fighting these same battles. We're still having these same discussions. And some people look at that and say, well, see, you can't do nothing except get rid of them. Well, we just have to keep working on it. And that's not a happy feeling. It doesn't make people feel good that we have to keep working. But we've got to keep working and show progress. We need more Black officers. We need more officers who are from the community. We also need to make it clear that these things are unacceptable. There is a reason you don't see every day a white kid getting pulled over by the police and then brutally murdered. We just don't, right? I mean, you look at the situation that happened in Harper Woods last summer, where you had a Black woman who was in police custody who died. And there was an investigation, all those things happened, but there's an inherent mistrust about these things, and rightfully so. And so until we can address the trust by saying we're going to make the requisite changes, people are going to continue to be uncomfortable, are going to continue to mistrust, and are going to continue to act and operate as though these systems and individuals mean them harm because they've seen them mean them harm so frequently.
Right. And I think that kind of touches on the aspect of, I've been reading Heather McGhee's The Sum of Us, where it looks at race relations in America as a zero-sum game. And you look at a zero-sum meaning if I win, you lose. And so with a lot of our policies, things that are going to benefit everybody, like a rising tide lifts all boats. And if everybody wins, then the society is better as a whole. But, a lot of what happened in the 1980s, you started to see this oh, well, the rise of this welfare queen or policing, is the answer, or, just the criminalization of folks and, things that are now seen as mental health problems were criminalized, like, drug usage and things of that nature. So it's like, this is the real problem, because, when you dehumanize people and you're seeing, somebody as, less human or less, worthy of the value that, our society has kind of built systems to, it should be protecting us all. And instead, it's kind of seen as, well, it's meant for some, but not all of us. So I think that kind of, gets into, one of our other questions, and I do have a question here from an audience member, and I do want to back up for that one. Keith asked, state Republicans keep saying that Governor Whitmer will not talk to them or meet with them. And it seems that, it's hard to believe. What's the real situation?
So the real situation is, it comes back down to this level of trust, right? So yeah, Governor Whitmer will say that she's ready to meet and talk. And they're like, well, if we're going to talk, we're going to do these things. Like, everyone has come, they are coming with these level of demands and doing these kinds of things. And there's just a whole lack of trust of them saying, well, we're not going to negotiate with you about this until you do X. And that X is open up the state. And it's like, well, for the record, let me just kind of clear the air. There are only two things that are closed right now: strip clubs and water parks. Say it again: strip clubs and water parks. And Republicans are not out here advocating for strip clubs to be open. They're not you've never heard them say, well, we got to get these water parks back open. It's cold. That's why water parks aren't open. And, like, those are the things that we're doing. And they're like, well, restaurants need to be at 100%. Well, no, like, it has become this political nonsense. The governor has been willing to talk about all these kinds of things, but Republicans were doing this before COVID hit. They passed a budget that they did not negotiate with the governor or her team on. They have been doing these kind of things. And so the relationship is extremely strained. And we're getting into a space where they're like, well, no, she needs to come to us. And there is a lot of inherent sexism in the discussions that have been happening that you would not see if Gretchen Whitmer were a white man, if Dana Nessel were a white man, a heterosexual white man, that if Jocelyn Benson was a white man, you wouldn't have, or to some extent, even a black man in some of these spaces, because we recognize that there are different levels of how people view gender and race and all those other kind of pieces. But yes, the governor has offered and does talk to them. They have quadrant meetings, which is the governor and the 4 legislative leaders, and they do interact. They just haven't talked about these things. And I think that's been abundantly clear why.
It's very true. And I keep saying this because look at like California versus us. And it's like Gavin Newsom has been able to, say use the same policies. And it's like California had these numbers and then they went up, they shut down. People didn't go crazy. It's the same with Governor Cuomo. Like, maybe he's a terrible example now because of all this negative scrutiny. But at the same time, at that moment, people were just like, okay, the governor said. And what's the difference? At first I was thinking, oh, okay, maybe it's Republican versus Democrat, but no, these are all Democratic mayors, or I'm sorry, governors. And, you're still getting this kind of backlash and this pushback. And that's the thing. It's just, we really have to be able to, have that conversation around like women in politics, which is why I keep saying that, like, we have to, even as women, we have to do a better job of, supporting each other and, just kind of getting rid of that. And I love that you as a male, are fighting the patriarchy by acknowledging and, putting it out there that, this is something we have to overcome. Yeah. I also want to use that I'm talking about, the Michigan legislature to pivot into what are some of the legislative items on the agenda for you right now in the Senate? What are some of the big initiatives you're pushing for, you're advocating for District 2?
Yeah, so I've worked a lot on veterans related things. So one of the things that I have a bill that's gone to committee, it's to create veterans licensing reciprocity. So, you came off active duty and maybe your spouse or dependent children were licensed to be a barber or a psychologist or a clinician, and you want to move back to Michigan or move to Michigan for the first time, being able to keep your license because you had a license in another state, changing it and providing similar not protections, but allowing you to use your veterans benefits if you're in the National Guard, your education assistance for, spouse, and then eventually maybe dependents. Been working on and really proud and excited to have been a part of the government's poverty task force. That work has been led by Kim Trent, and talking about the prosperity agenda. So how we address the incredible issues with childcare affordability, because as somebody with 2 kids in daycare, it is our most expensive bill, right? Like more expensive than house or anything like that. It's daycare. And that's just not affordable for most families. And when you talk about trying to go back to work or trying to work, the pandemic has laid bare that for so many folks, especially when schools closed and continue to not operate the same way, it's the woman who has had to step away from the workforce. And that's because they couldn't manage childcare. Mm-hmm. And often the woman is the one who stepped back because of pay equity issues. And so if a woman, and start talking about a Black woman, you're talking about making 60, 70 cents on the dollar that a man is making. And that has a huge impact in who's staying home from work. I don't know if I'm frozen.
I think you're frozen. Well, nope.
Maybe. Yeah, I definitely was frozen. But, as I was talking, when you talk about that kind of pay equity gap, that makes it, that's played a huge role in why people have decided not to, stay in the workforce, because they had to go home. They had to go take care of their kids because no one else could, and they weren't going to make the same amount as that male spouse. So, that causes and continue to cause, some astronomical issues that have just been exacerbated by pay equity. So working on some of those kind of things. We've got some unemployment insurance bills that we've been working on. The kind of shiny object, if there is one, has been, I've really been leading the charge to get film incentives back into the state of Michigan.
That was one of our questions from the audience here. Somebody wanted to know about film subsidies. They read about, this in free press.
Yeah, and so the way that we really need to be looking at film incentives is as advertising, right? So imagine this is a Coke bottle or, insert whatever brand you want. The difference between you not being able to see the logo and being able to see the logo costs something, right? There's some value to that. And Michigan spends a good amount of money on our Pure Michigan campaign. It's extremely popular. Imagine if we ran those commercials during movies, during TV shows, and leveraged that by and said, hey, it's worth 1 million people, a multi-million number of people seeing those kind of things, because we had a really successful film incentive that brought dollars in it and was successful, right? So I helped Stars was here just last week filming episodes for the Black Mafia Family, a TV show that is set in Detroit that's being filmed in Atlanta because Atlanta has film incentives. And they would love to be here. They spent $4.5 million in Detroit and Southeastern Michigan last week. That's money that would not have been here otherwise. And it's money that goes to a whole host of folks, right? So the caterer, the nail tech, the hair folks, the trucking folks, like those are a lot of local jobs, small business owners that are getting that work that's local. And if we put back a robust incentive program, that just makes it make sense for people to make the financial costs. It'll do it. 41 states in the country have one, including Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia. Michigan's one that doesn't. And that's why we don't see more things filmed here. We have a great space to do it. Places want to be here. And I'm going to continue to advocate for it. And I've been working with my Republican colleagues, and a number of them seem to be pretty excited about it. It's just changing the way we view incentives.
And you hit on another question, Keith was asking, does that have bipartisan support? And, it seems like everybody, would be on board with that. And, I have another comment here that says, the state of safety has become political. As a social worker, the state of safety should never be viewed as political. And, safety is a basic human right. And, she just wanted to, let you know in terms of like, being safe, going into work for the people. And thank you for everybody who's commenting, and, definitely keep the questions coming. Adam is here. He's working for you for Senate District 2. So, drop your questions right here in the chat. But one of the other questions that I wanted to, ask was, you know, how do you practice self-care? I know this is something you like to ask a lot of people on your podcast, which is the We Can Do Better podcast, which is the best title ever, because it's like, yeah, you deserve better. You can elevate. You can just continue to fight for more. So we can do better as a society. And what do you do for self-care?
So honestly, my wife teases me, but I exercise, right? Like I am a bad person when I don't exercise, right? Like I know everybody, those Snickers commercials where it's like, who are you when you're hungry? Like you don't want to see
Like
me when I have an
old Betty White or like, Danny
Yeah.
DeVito or somebody. It's like
I'm Machete, I'm Danny Trujillo, right? Like I'm not a good person when I don't exercise. I need to get that energy out. I need to get that frustration. I need to move. And so I do, I have a gym I built in my garage. Before pandemic, I had a gym in the basement. During the pandemic, I cleaned out my garage in a major way. I also like to build. And so it's kind of a good intersection of the things I really like to do. So I build and I work out. And so if I'm having a really bad day, like if something's really going on, I put Legos together. So like I build something. So depending upon what kind of stressors I have, you will see the level of project I am undertaking. So if you see me undertaking a giant project out of nowhere, something must have really happened. But yeah.
In the legislature or,
Legislator, I'm probably putting together some, couple 100-piece little Lego toy thing, or I'm out in the gym lifting weights. Like it's nothing more calming than lifting heavy weights and really getting that good sweat or movement. That's what I like to do, right? Some people, it's garden, playing with the munchkins can be fun. So my daughter Lillian is fast and likes to run. And so we'll go in the backyard and like play crazy obstacle course tag, and we'll like climb ropes and jump over elements and like flip tires. She's not flipping, but she'll jump in the tires, and we'll do kind of those kind of things. But like that's how I take care of myself, and spending that time and that perspective with family and moving around really makes all the difference for me.
Okay. And I need to have advice from you on how to get swole, because I have started I joined this thing called Women Who Lift, and it's a weightlifting program. And it's 3 months, and just any advice on like not hurting yourself or not overdoing it or pushing through when you know that you can step it up. I was with the 3-pound weights today and coach didn't say nothing, but I know I could have did the 5s. And that's still low,
Yeah. I mean, so I think the big thing as people talk about working out, as we talk about kind of gender norms, men for the most part need to do more cardio, and women for the most part need to do more strength training. It's just not what society pushes forward into our space, right? Like when you think about aerobics classes, you're thinking about women. When you're thinking about lifting heavy weights, you're typically thinking about men. And what is most important is some degree of balance. And so when we start thinking about lifting weights, you're like, oh, I only lift 3 or 5 pounds. Well, how much does your water bottle, weigh? Or like, it's like, what do you need to be able to move to do the things that exist in your world? And so I'm always a big proponent of being able to lift the kind of things that you're going to interact with in your world. And so I think lifting heavy weights is fun. I enjoy it. You got to get some heavy weights. That's the only way you're going to get swole. So men's fitness, I think they do this little thing. It's called Gym and Fridge, and they're like swole, ripped, or jacked. And swole is like big, right? Like it's like massive. Like I'm like that's swole. And then jacked is like that kind of in between of like very defined muscle. So like they would say The Rock. I think they would say The Rock is swole. And like Michael B. Jordan would be jacked.
Because he's lean, but he's very muscular. So it's like the percentage of like, is that just like bulk versus like?
I mean, I think they would say like Michael B. Jordan was like jacked in Creed when he was still a little bit bigger and muscle defined. But I think when people think about that kind of ripped space, it's like that more lean, very defined abs versus having a little bit more bulk. And so you just got to figure out what you want to be able to do and what you want to do, and thinking about it. But if you want to get bigger, you have to lift big weights. So they call that hypertrophy. So you cannot make yourself any bigger without doing that. And what I think is really most important as we talk about body image is the still images you see in magazines or catalogs. That is someone who was training for that day. That person, whether man or woman, does not look like that all month. They were in a cycle. And that cycle went from a bulking phase. So you build up the muscle and then you chisel that muscle down and then you lean it so you can see all the definition and the little rips and all those kind of things. But it doesn't last for a long time, right? Like that's a cycle that you kind of roll up and down in. Now, myself personally, I prefer French fries too much to have those kind of ripped abs, but maybe one day. I always tell myself this summer it's going to happen, but the deep fryer says French fries are going to happen for me more. So
French fries are so much more, like, that's the thing. It's such a weakness, and for me, the weakness is cupcakes, sweets. Oh my gosh, I'm like, you know what? Without them, what is life? So
you just got to enjoy the things you do, and so let the other stuff go, right? So for me, it's French fries. I'm not trying to go crazy on sweets because I don't care. But my French fries, I'm gonna have them. Gonna have my beet fries, gonna have my sweet potato fries, gonna have golden beet fries. I like fries.
Exactly. And with that, I do those are my questions, but I still wanted to also kind of share this piece of just like this story where I feel that it's kind of interesting that the name of your podcast is We Can Do Better. And folks, go out there, find Senator Hollier's podcast, listen to it, subscribe, watch the playback on YouTube, follow him on Instagram, Twitter, and also Facebook. But when you were running for state senate, I was running for my very first office ever. I was running for school board. And so you kind of like, you saw my flyer and it was paper thin and it was just like, you can tell it was just like, okay, where are your endorsements? Where is this? Where is all of this? And you just kind of gave this advice. And at the time, we talk about like being mentally tough and, just this is the work that we are in for, working in this arena. We're really fighting for the people. And so it requires a tough skin. And I think I really learned that from you. And, I just want to say thank you for being that person who's just like, you are going to lose this race because you needed to be doing more of this. And I learned so much from that. And I did lose the race, but I think it was something that, you kind of like gave that tough love. And I was just like, I'm going to expect this from him every time, where you want people to like level up. And, I think I appreciate knowing you, and I appreciate that kind of level of fight that you give for District 2. I know you've been fighting for Harper Woods with, a lot of the, upheaval we faced last year. And, it's still something that I think it's really great to have, a senator like you, not only fighting for us, but then also you want people around you to level it up, step it up, and to always be your best and do better. So,
I think the thing for me is we've got to build space and make people want to do better. And so it's one thing to want to do better. It's another thing to have the tools to be able to actually do that and a space to do that. And so I look at it as my job to create a space that you can be better in, right? To create and get you exposure and opportunities to have those tools, because it's super nice. And, people love saying, well, you can do this or you can do better. It's like, no, they don't have what they need to be more successful. And so I look at my role of, saying, hey, Ernestine, this is where you need to be. And to get here, you need these things. Let me help you get these things. Let me help you get in this space. Because that's how we move the needle. That's how we make our community and our space better. And I recognize just how lucky and blessed I've been throughout my life and career, and that there have always been all these folks who are looking out for me and taking care of me and making it happen. And so I really think it and consider it my role and my space to bring other folks that same level of opportunity, because I did not get here by doing that, by not having those kind of things or by myself. And I didn't win my first race. And, I remember what those kind of things were like. And the people who tell you the truth when you need it are the ones that are actually there for you to see you advance and get better. And that's what we need more of.
All right, couldn't have said it better myself, and that is a perfect way to close it out. So thank you to everybody who commented, and let me make sure no more questions here. Thank you for everybody out there watching. Thank you for watching out there in cyberspace. And all right, we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up online with the live. Okay, and end the recording.